Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science or the study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake, liar, imagination. Believe me, there is so much propaganda in the world. It's difficult for anyone to understand what's going on. And people have given up also. It's rather better to watch a movie than to hear media. And that's how you'll see many media houses are going bankrupt and most people are not watching. But the independent content creators like us who research and present, people are liking our content to make a view. Our focus is on ancient history. We are not a political show. So we won't talk about, we are purely talking theoretical and academic. I have very special guest whom you love a lot. And I know he has been come on our show. There are all his playlists are available. So let us welcome Ankit Shah. Welcome,
Thank you,
Ankit.
Aditya ji. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Yep.
Thank you for coming on the show again. And one question comes in now. People should follow his Twitter handle, and the Twitter handle I will put it out on there. But it is I will read it out for you. I am Ankit, like I am Ankit Shah.
Ankit at the rate IMA.
I am a, and that's a Twitter handle name. Twitter handle.
Yep.
Yeah. So people can follow him on Twitter, and I'll also put it on the scroll down on the message so you can follow him there too. In all his videos, that Twitter handle will be updated. So watch what he writes over there because one lines are very deep enough. So uh, at the rate Ankit IMA. Okay, Ankit at IMA. So Ankit, when it comes to stock markets now, and you have been studying them and you told me that you went through a specific course even to more understand how it works. So
Mhm.
what do you think the only stock market which raises a lot of funds like Nasdaq and other places is the tech stocks. So what is happening with the world of stock markets? Because American stock market is down since 2020.
Mhm. Yep. So I'll take you to a little bit of history on where all this started from. So Aditya ji, things started from the formation of the central banking system. So if we look at the history of how the Federal Reserve was created around 1913, when it went into full kind of a role for the centralized banking for the United States, you realize that the need for central banking stems from two important pieces of governance of statecraft. One is the monetary and the fiscal policy portion of governance, which the central government governance helps with, and second is with the taxation and the flow of credit in terms of people and individual and institutions taking loans, making deposits, and the spread between the loans and the deposits and the lending and the borrowing is what the profits for the banks in general be. So, the politicians have this urge of, declaring freebies when it comes to elections, uh, declaring government schemes which benefit the underprivileged, the retired, and those people who don't have income, etc., etc., to solve poverty, to bridge the gap, economic inequalities, etc., etc. These are the excuses that they have for, declaring mass blanket freebies, food stamps, etc. So, somebody has to bear this cost. So, whenever these freebies are declared, there are two ways of recovering that cost. One is that you lay tax on people and collect the amount for the freebies to sponsor the freebies that you have declared, and second is uh, you just print more money. I mean, if you just print more money, what happens is the purchasing power of the notes in the people's hand automatically come down, and that is how this is another method of recovering the freebies cost, right? So the politicians require the central banking system so that they are able, because you cannot tax people above a limit. If you tax people directly above a limit, they are going to vote you out next time when the election comes. So politicians need central banks so that they can print more notes and reduce the purchasing power of the currency notes that you have in your hand. And that is how a portion of this gigantic government expenditure or the freebies or the government schemes is sponsored from. One is taxation, and second is this. So this was the need why central banking was required. Obviously, regulation of trade and currency, etc., other allied objectives. Why did the corporate? I mean, because as we all know that when the baton of leadership passed on to the other side of Atlantic from UK to US, a few aristocrat families had a consolidation of power in the United States, and that is how the deep state concept came into being. So why did the corporate also help the government in working up this formula of centralized banking? Is because you cannot just drop the amount of payments that you are giving to your employees all of a sudden. I mean, they will realize that you paid them lesser than what you were paying before. So it makes sense for the corporate to get low interest rates loans from the central bank, from the banking formula, and they are able to give a raise to the people, to the jobbers who are doing jobs, and they would not even realize that because of the more printing that the central banks have done, despite their salary has risen, the purchasing power has come down, right? So this is exactly why the corporate and the politicians nexus support the centralized banking system, which is why one of my predictions being that the private cryptos won't be allowed to do the legal tender of money usage of cryptocurrencies, which they intend to do. I mean, these won't be allowed. This is the primary reason, because they challenge the central banking. And when we challenge the centralized banking, it means that the politicians and the corporate both are hit, because that is where not just the government schemes and freebies, but also the election campaign funds come from, because through the politicians, through the loans that they get from these banks. So this is how the entire nexus is being created. Coming to the stock markets. Now, one thing is that if you want to create an extreme capitalism environment where few capitalists are going to rule over the masses, what happens is you need to suck out the people's savings or whatever the accumulation of wealth that they have done over a time. So stock market was devised as a vehicle to bring the family corpus or the accumulated wealth of people into the mainstream, and then it was passed on to companies so that they are able to give salaries. And this is how owners of businesses, small businesses, have to compulsory now go for jobs. That remains as the only option. So this is how extreme capitalism works, and obviously this is the Western template where all this is born. Now, coming to the stock markets at the present, why it is going down. So there's a little bit of history also about it. So let me take you to directly 1971, when this concept of fiat dollar came into force, where the gold was taken off from the standard, the convertibility was stopped, which made the entire US dollar as a fiat currency. And then in 1973, we had the petrodollar concept in this oil for security with the Gulf. So both these fiat dollar and petrodollar concepts gave birth to the IT sector, the information technology sector in the West, right? And the entire reserve currency bubble got accumulated in the dot-com startups in the late 1990s, right? These are not fair valuations. These are intangibles. At this point in time, the S&P 500 in the US stock markets has 90% value in the intangibles. And what are these intangibles? These intangibles are customer data, brand value perception. So all these are notional values which have bubbled up in the stocks. There is no real base to back it up. So coming back to the petrodollar and the fiat dollar concepts, because of these two, the recycling that the world has to do for the fiat dollar and the petrodollar, all the investments went into particularly the IT sector, which created the dot-com bubble by the late 1990s. Now, on 1st January 1999, euro currency was launched. This was the first ever de-dollarization attempt by the world, wherein Europe, the European Union decided to come up with a currency which will be a common currency of trade between the European nations for the bilateral trade, which means the US dollar was out of those transactions between, if you say, for example, Germany and France. Now, this was the first ever de-dollarization attempt. So by 24th March to June 1999, US fooled NATO into bombing Yugoslavia to bring the euro valuation down. This was the first counter to the de-dollarization attempt which European Union made. Now the US started panicking because there was an urgent need to cook up some Ponzi scheme to infuse the printed dollars into the IT sector and as well the other sectors in the stock market. So by 12th November 1999, there was an act which was brought. It is called the Gramm-Leach-Billy Act. Now, this was brought to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act requirements of keeping investment banking separate from commercial banking. All right. So the Glass-Steagall Act, which is decades old, was removed or repealed or made ineffective with this new act, the Gramm-Leach-Billy Act, which now, mixed up the commercial banking with the investment banking, which means now the banks can, as soon as your deposit amount in your account, the banks can sweep into its own account and then invest it somewhere else, right? The same bank can now do commercial banking and investment banking. So now what happened was the entire reserve currency bubble shot up the .com, and that peaked the IT valuations by around mid of 2000, the year 2000. Now, the European Union said that we are not going to park our excess savings in the US treasuries and will not play the dollar and the treasury cycle, which keeps the US dollar going. Now, it's very interesting. As soon as the European Union, so-called allies, said that we are not going to play with this, keeping the US dollar, going as a reserve currency thing, the USD cycle, because entire world is supposed to invest in the US treasuries and the dollar. That is how it keeps going. Furious with that, United States brought on December 2001 China into the WTO as a revenge, and China in return promised that instead of the European Union, we are going to invest in the US treasuries. This is how, the entire hodgepodge was created. By October 2002, despite all of this, because it was just 1 year, China did not, the trade did not zoom so fast, making it the manufacturing giant that it has now become. By October 2002, the .com crashed with 78% fall from the peak valuations for the IT sector. This is exactly what happened. So, cut to today, if that was the first de-dollarization attempt by the European Union, which brought 75% valuations down for the IT sector, you should not be surprised. This is the final de-dollarization attempt by Asia and Gulf, which has begun, which is why the USD cycles have stopped, the dollar gradually being ousted from the bilateral trade between two nations. And this is how the IT sector is right now collapsing. And it will also collapse the realty sector in China, because the IT sector of the United States and the realty sector of China, these were the two main sections where the reserve currency bubble went and settled. So it's no surprise that the IT sector is going to further lose valuations, not just the IT sector. Understand that when this new act was brought in 1999, it allowed all the commercial banks to do investment banking. Your money being risked out on their investment brains, right? It's made legal, right? 2008 crisis, was anybody jailed? No one. Absolutely no one. Because all that they do is legal, right? So this is how not just the IT sector, many of the US stocks, as I said, S&P 500 has 90% intangibles in valuation. What is that? Customer data, brand valuation, some of the patents or those kind of stuff. These are the 3-4 items. So as the de-dollarization keeps taking pace further and further, I will not be surprised this year there should be a minimum of 15 to in the range of 15 to 35% of a bubble that is going to burst in the US stock markets, bonds, and derivatives this year. This year, I'm talking. Yeah.
You know, the American, if you look at the stock markets, became the main source of wealth generation for most Americans, and for the West also. And they thought that the gold has lived its relevance, and we saw that the paper currency became the main thing. The Sioux king once said that you are giving me paper for my land. My land is way more valuable. It's going to stay longer. I'm going to burn your paper, but land is going to still stay. So that is not a good business relationship. So my question to you is, how long will this paper-based currencies continue? Because the paper-based currencies are, just yesterday I heard that India, Larus is a company which makes paper-based currencies in London, and India had outsourced it to them. And that's where the Indian Finance Secretary is being questioned by CBI, Indian CBI, which is equivalent to FBI in US, but CBI has less powers than FBI. FBI can intrude into your home, CBI cannot. So what is the future of the paper currency then?
Yeah. So there are two parts of it. One is the security part, which you mentioned about the physical printed currency note. Second is the valuation part. I mean, if you look at the dollar, the way from the date it started to, I mean, after the centralized banking, right now it has lost about 98% of its purchasing power, right? $1. I mean, what it can buy with that, right? So you understand that these are relevant and existent because of the backing of the central government. Now, another question which, with the new technologies, blockchain technology and stuff like that coming up, which people are posing is that why do we need centralized banking if they are already doing this kind of hodgepodge things? So these are the supporters of the private cryptos. Now, the problem with the private cryptos is we do not know. I mean, if tomorrow my screen is going to show, say, out of 50K, now it suddenly shows 16K. Where exactly am I going to put up a complaint, or how can I address that as an individual user of a cryptocurrency? So there are many, many legal and serious questions about how you can hold someone accountable when it comes to digital currencies, which are private cryptos. So which is where the central banks are now coming up with their own digital currency. So you will have a digital dollar, a digital rupee, a digital yuan, and so on. Now, these are not yet pegged with anything, which means to say that they are also fiat, just like the printed note. But the BRICS nations are coming up with a formulation where they are going to peg their currency with real commodities like gold, silver, wheat, oil, gas, and all those kind of real production and real commodities. So once that happens, the value of this, whatever the printed note or the electronic entry of that currency, will hold real value once it is pegged to real commodities and production. Until then, this is all the fiat world that we are living in, which is backed by absolutely nothing, right? So this is all the fiat currencies are going to be questioned, and it's going to be a big trouble for the West, because the West, in this jest of keeping the United States dollar and euro with their reserve currency statuses of 59% and 20% respectively, they passed on entire manufacturing and production and real stuff to Asia and Gulf. So the West is going to have serious trouble once the BRICS currency is launched and Asia and Gulf says, hey, we can't take your payment. I mean, it's just a tissue paper. It is backed by nothing. So when that point in time comes, the West will be, gasping for oxygen, actually, like how to trade. Or, what's going to happen is Asia and Gulf will say, hey, if you don't have a currency which is pegged with any real thing, start paying with gold and silver, right? So this is exactly where it is heading towards. The crisis is heading towards.
So how different is the Indian stock exchange? Because Indian stock exchange is heavily reliant on the FIIs, foreign institutional investors. And how is Indian stock exchange placed? Because they are also following the same principles.
Mhm. So the Indian when it comes to Indian stock exchanges, the our industries. I mean, if I'm supposed to give you an example of the IT sector, now when I say S&P 500 of the United States has 90% valuation of intangibles, if that kind of valuations are done in India, the person would be in jail, right? So, in terms of regulatory requirements and accounting standards and principles, we are far better than what hodgepodge is going on in the Western economies. As far as the stock markets is concerned, while the template is Western, the fact that the stocks do represent real production, underlying assets of these companies which are listed on the stock exchange. While there is an element of speculation, as long as the FIIs are concerned, obviously, when the Western economies are going to face the upcoming crisis events, there are going to be massive withdrawals from the Indian stock markets. But I believe that the domestic investments will more or less make good about it. So I do, and when the valuations flip, when I say valuations flip, when a pegged currency will come up, what that means is that all the sectors which were suppressed till now in Asia and Gulf, which is gold, silver, farming, manufacturing, enterprising, logistics, all the sectors which were real production and real commodities and enterprising, which were suppressed for the last 40, 50 years, they are going to zoom like anything. And which is why it is going to make up, I mean, much more than the tiny loss of the FII withdrawals, which we are going to see. So I believe that the Asians and the Gulf countries won't have as much trouble as the West is going to face, because in the West there is too much paper and very less physical to back it up with. We have already seen the news of funds, the realty sector funds, the pension funds putting withdrawals, investor withdrawals limits, right? Because they have nothing to back up if people suddenly have a bank run and start collecting stuff. And it is going to happen, Aditya at the end of the day, when one fine day you wake up and you realize that the currency notes that you have, Asia and Gulf is saying hey, that's just a tissue paper, it's fiat, it's backed with nothing. We are not going to accept that as payment. So when that critical moment comes, one fine day that is going to come, what is going to happen is that the Western people are going to rush to the banks, because as soon as you lose the trust in the government and its financial systems, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to run to a bank, submit all the notes that you have, and walk out with gold coins and gold bars, which the banks can give in exchange, or some jewelry shop. This is the first thing, and people will start hoarding real commodities, which is like the daily requirements of food and all those stuff, right? So people are just going to, as soon as you lose the trust in the government and the financial systems, you're going to just walk in and give them back their notes. This is what happens when the crisis events come, which is why they limit withdrawals.
You know, it's you said 90% of his intangibles. People don't understand what it means by 90% intangibles. What does that mean exactly?
90% intangibles means it is air. It is nothing. So
Yes.
the entire reserve currency bubble is sitting over there. So all the the X trust factor of the dollar, which people blindly believed in, parked their savings inside the United States stocks. That is what that is. It's backed by nothing, so it's going to blow up.
It's like a mythology. The word dollar comes from the Greek, Dolores, and it's like the Greek history, Greek mythology.
I won't be surprised. I mean, 15 to 35% is the range in which this year, 2023, the stocks are going to have a bloodbath. There's no doubt about it.
So if we say like for example, the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world and people are trading in it, the dollar rates exchange is very strong. But the inflation in the US is also very high. I mean, if the dollar is so strong, the imports must be cheap.
Hmm.
But the imports are not cheap. Imports are also going up. So how is this possible economic wise?
So what is happening right now is that we are in a de-dollarization scripting stage, wherein this Ukraine war has become an excuse to crunch the supplies. Because what Asia is looking forward now is whatever that we are producing, we are going to give first priority to the Gulf in exchange of energy, in invoicing and valuation by our national currencies until the BRICS thing come up, right? So when all this bilateral trade starts shifting to bilateral currencies outside of the US dollar, that is how the United States dollar is unable to pass on the inflation to the rest of the world, and it itself has to face it. That is what is happening. And that will continue to happen. If anyone in the West thinks that the inflation is going to be solved, they are in for a big shock, because interest and inflation is nothing but all the socialist freebies that your government printed, all the benefits, that retirement benefits, entitlement benefits, social benefits, income security, food stamps, right? All these printed over several decades are now to be repaid back. Some generation has to repay this back, and that repayment will be in terms of inflation and higher interest rates. These are the two methods with which you pay for all the enjoyment that you did for over the years because of the reserve currency privilege that you had. So right now, when the stock markets are going to, I mean, 20% already lost last year, another 15 to 35% range, which I am predicting for this year, is nothing but that reserve currency bubble accumulated over the years in the US stocks, which is going to burst, right? So the dollar is right now sucking back the entire reserve currency bubble it had sponsored in the US stocks, bonds, and derivatives over the years. It is sucking back that value into itself, which means that the oversupply of the dollar, despite the oversupply of the dollar, the value is still going up, right? And that is what causes the inflation. The DXY is going to, and I believe that once the dollar peaking in the sense, I am looking at a DXY in the range of 130 to 145, 150. That will be the climax position from where the collapse will begin. So the dollar is going to peak that much, and that is the point in time when the stocks will be at their lowest. That is, the entire bubble would have burst. That bloodbath would be over by that point in time. And I think that is where that will be the moment of truth and opportunity for the US economy to now do a reset, and maybe with a digital dollar, because that is what they are coming up with middle of this year.
It's a rude shock for many Americans who are used to counting the currency notes, and they'll be faced with digital dollar. And I think in many, I mean, you'll be shocked to know that most of the US banks don't operate in Mexico. So there you have to carry the physical dollar. So they'll have to make a lot of changes, like in integrating Mexican economy, because Mexico accepts US dollars as a currency. Like you can do either Mexican pesos or you can pay in US dollar. So what will happen to all those countries who accept American dollar?
So all those countries, US is in fact looking for this kind of countries, because they already know that the UK currency and the EU currencies are going to be, damaged with the Ukraine conflict that is going on, the scripted conflict of de-dollarization. And by the way, I believe it is very wise to have a fake conflict than a real war for stopping the de-dollarization. So I believe that this entire setup script which is created of this Ukraine conflict, that is actually good for humanity, in the sense that you are not going to have some real war for stopping the de-dollarization process. So it is very good that that the United States is in alignment to finish off this fiat currency model. This is how I look at it. I mean, I know that most of the experts won't agree with this, but I believe that this entire script is created so that the United States also wants the fiat currencies to go. But along with that, United States will also want a sphere of influence of countries who are using the US dollar. So Mexico, as you said, was one such example, and I'm not surprised that now there is chaos in Peru. I see a clear linkage of this with the vassals that US needs to now create, looking at the new BRICS currency coming up. So they need these nations, the South American continent nations, by their side. I did get this hint as soon as I found that Miss America has won the pageant, and the remaining four participants were the South American continent countries. So I got this hint that this is how United States is now going to move forward. It needs those vassal countries to, accept the hegemony of the US dollar. So Mexico, the South American continent countries, some of the countries of the EU, this is how the United States will look forward to create vassal states who would support the US dollar in the future once this entire reset is complete in 1.5 to 2.5 years after the launch of the pilot of the BRICS currency.
You also mentioned that the BRICS currency is going to be a pool of currencies, not just one currency. And everyone is going to trade in their national currencies, and then they're going to exchange goods. It's like return of the barter system, isn't it? It's a glorified barter system. I mean, so we are going back to where the Mahabharata started, Arthashastra. So, so it's like the history repeating itself. And so the old economic systems of the world are continuing. Even though the Nishk was a global currency during Yudhishthir's time and Bhagwan Ram's time also, Nishk was the name of the currency. But still, I mean, it was still barter system that every state was producing their own coins and exchanging it, or in terms of those coins were nickel and gold combined, and that technology is not there, nickel and gold. I don't know whether it is there or not. I don't know. It's very difficult to combine those two metals. Now, so what do you see as the future of the world in, say, 10 years down the line in terms of stock markets? Because stock markets have been a wealth creator for many companies, but individuals, it created a lot of income divide also. That some people were earning more and some people were earning less. And whenever there is a inequality divide is more, the social cohesion destroys itself, self-destroys. So do you think that the balanced model of American bad word socialism, which America is more socialistic than even Russia today, and the bad word of capitalism is also bad, because in terms of extreme capitalism creates extreme poverty. So do you think the mixture will come in play in the world economy?
So Aditya ji, in the world of economics and finance, when we sit in a class, the first thing that we hear is that there are only two economic models. One is capitalist and the second is the communist theory. So what has happened in the world in the last, when this concepts of only two theories in existence have come into play, is that we have seen the extreme ends, and none of these countries who are following these extreme ends are able to justify if even they follow the core principles of these two theories. So when US is talking about a free market or a free world, what we realize, there are only few capitalists running and calling the shots and the masses are supposed to follow. Similarly, when you look at the communist China, I mean, they are doing free trade and exports and keeping private wealth as well. And when it comes to governance, it's a surveillance state. So the capitalism and communism anyways has mixed up in both the countries. The United States doing massive amount of socialist freebies. So both the theories have completely failed because they have gone to the extreme end of those theories, wherein there was no possibility of a rebound or a balance, which is why they have to suddenly then resort to freebies. The capitalist has to resort to freebies, and the communist has to resort to free trade and private wealth. So this is where the balance need to be brought in, which is where the ancient India Sanatan economics model will fall into place. And this is going to be my second book this year. So in terms of keeping the balance between the two, what the churn that you are seeing and is going to see this entire decade is that the whole wealth of people is about the enterprising family structure. Now, when you brought this British classroom model of human trafficking of people from classroom to jobs, because they are stuffed into it for 15 to 20 years within four walls, totally out of sync with market realities. So you traffic them into companies, and then the few capitalists are able to call all the shots, be and by government and God knows what all. So this model was supposed to fall. It is very obvious to fall. Now, what is going to happen is once the currencies are pegged with real commodities and production, it is going to be very difficult, one, for the politicians to declare freebies as and when they want, because the gold is not going to absorb this kind of political interference shocks. Uh, None of these real commodities will. So that wiggle room of endless printing and endless declaration of freebies is going to be no more for the politicians in the new world of pegged currency. Similarly, for the few capitalists, it is going to be very, very difficult uh, to suck the family corpus and the family savings via the stock market directly into the companies. So somewhere the extreme capitalism is going to come down, with service sector facing a big shock of all the unrequired jobs vanishing. And on the other side, you will find a big boom in the startup and the enterprising ecosystem of the middle class of the huge chunk of population, looking at traditional ways of living, looking at traditional ways of saving and investing into their own businesses. And this is how a balance between capitalism and communism will automatically come into place, because the capitalist would no longer be able to suck out all the savings which people have via the stock market, nor the politicians would be able to announce freebies, socialist freebies, the way they like. So I think there's going to be a huge trim on both the ends of capitalism and communism when these tools are going to be questioned this entire decade.
China is a capitalistic country with a communist government. Very clearly, China is the entire capitalism is controlled capitalism through the Communist Party of China. So they copied the American model and suited it, adapted to their environment. So there is no clear, and most of the socialistic countries are the countries governed by the Vatican indirectly. Most of them, because the poverty is what they sell. And they sell poverty so that everybody can come to them and depend on them for prosperity. So how far the religious institutions, and I don't consider Sanatana Dharma as a religion, it's an essential duty, like it needs to be done. So the organized religions, what will be the role of organized religions who have thrived based on Western capitalism while criticizing it?
So a lot of the religious funding stuff is going to be questioned moving forward, especially the funding which arose from the Western world, because the endless printing also meant, just as they devised, as I explained at the beginning, they devised the formula of fiat currency, and the way they brought the entire savings of the middle class via the stock market into the companies. And the endless printing is able to give low interest rate loans to the few capitalists, which is how the politicians are going to route election campaigns and all those fundings. Similarly, the same way, the role of the church and the missionary activities are majorly in nexus with the kind of the financial hodgepodge the Western governments have created with this fiat currency model. What is going to happen next is, once this free, easy, and cheap money printing ends, all those free flowing taps of funding are going to be turned off suddenly, which means there will be a backtracking from the missionary activities which we see worldwide, sponsored via NGOs and even via organizations, by the way. and by the Western influences and institutes. All these, conversion activities are going to have a big halt. Uh, Second thing is about the radicalization. Now, the Middle East has realized that in order to keep the fiat currency model, especially of the dollar, going, it lost at least half of its wealth in radicalizing the region, right? So, Iran talking Saudi Arabia is a kafir. The Turkey is saying that uh, Iran is a problem. So all these entire Middle East, the violence that was created by the US dollar, now they have also realized that if we don't start doing some real economics, we have to stop using this finite free crude oil which is coming out from our soil, and we have now to do some real economics if in order to survive. If we don't want to go back to the camels again, right? So I see de-dollarization as equal to de-radicalization, as equal to de-missionarization, and also de-communism, because the socialist freebies will also go. So I believe a big reset is coming, and all of these is going to benefit Sanatan Dharma massively. I think it's India's time now. This is India's century where we are going to guide the world on how to live life and how to do economics and whatnot.
I mean, the oldest living civilization and the oldest culture of the world has been disrespected a lot by the West, and the time has come. Karma has a it's a nature of turning, and it is turning now. So one last question is, like, when you see the economics backed by military, because it is always said that military is also dharma. We have to protect the land. We don't see that Indian psyche happening, that they need to have a stronger military to protect their economic rise. Stronger means projection capabilities need to be much higher. Means
Mhm.
so that the people cannot even think of, just like what is the condition of US, is that no one can think of attacking US. It's not possible. So the same kind of mindset, or Russia, for example, you can't attack Russia. They have shown you multiple times. US. So is that mindset also coming in India to protect? Because all BRICS nation cannot protect itself. Probably India may protect itself to some ways, but that projection capability is still very weak. What do you think of that?
Well, I believe post 2014, Adityaji, that has massively changed. The entire setup has been revamped, and I believe that this is the country which no enemy would like to do any kind of armed conflict or a mischief with. I'll tell you, India is the only country which has attacked a nuclear neighbor. None of the so-called powers which you mentioned, Russia, China, or United States, have ever militarily touched with arms and weapons, real arms and weapons, gone into their territory and attacked, right? Any nuclear power? I don't think so. Any of the three powers have done it as yet. So I believe that, you know, the economic might is what supports the hard power and also the soft power. Uh, so I have covered this massively in the book launch that is going to be next month on geopolitics. How the soft power is supported by the money power, and also the hard power supported by the money power. So when the Indian economy is going to face this entire reset, after which, as I believe that Indians have the highest private per capita gold with them. So when this entire flip in the valuations will happen, you will automatically see that India has crossed the valuations and the thresholds which a big power should have. I think that economic might will automatically translate in terms of defense and offensive capacities, and we are already seeing it. I mean, people were laughing, and even some of the Western media narrative I've seen where they were saying that, oh, India cannot cannot build afford an aircraft carrier, whereas the Prime Minister already talked about some 4, 5, 6, 7, starting with Vikrant, Vishal, and Vihangam and whatnot. So the third aircraft carrier is also in the making. So I believe that a lot of hard power will also automatically come out of India, and you will see it. And I see a lot of US defense tech companies who are, now flocking down to India because they realize that this is the power which is building up in this for this century. This is where the brains lie. This is the DNA which, it just gives out 3 4 languages. It learns by, just like a morning snack it can digest. So I think that, the world is going to now center at India. And to just to give you an example representation, the NDB, the New Development Bank, which is building up in the gift city of Gujarat, I believe that is going to be the nodal agency for all the de-dollarization operations of the BRICS participant nations. And it's going to, in effect, become a kind of a mini World Bank for the future world.
Thank you so much. And also, by the way, audience should know that the Apache helicopter shells are made in India. So America does fly. The cockpit is made in India. Everything else is they fit into it. Thank you so much, Ankit. And it's always a pleasure. And you give a futuristic perspective based on your original research. And viewers, you should copy his, forward his tweets. And the tweet you could have seen it, his Twitter handle. And don't copy paste. Just give credit to the person who has written it. So
All right. Thank
thank
you.
you so much and namaste.